Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. Sidekick Hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined this week by Ruairi Walsh. Ruairi, how are things?
Not too bad, Mark. Yourself?
All good. I suppose, Ruairi, we'll focus in on the All Ireland prelim quarterfinal review. We'll also look at the revamp. Plenty of people have been talking about it, so I might get your thoughts there, Ruairi, in terms of how would you revamp the All Ireland series. Quarterfinal preview, obviously. We have a doubleheader in the TUS Gaelic grounds. Limerick injury was, well, Declan Hannon being confirmed as an absentee for the All Ireland Senior Hurling semi-final. And also, Rory, I know you have an interest in terms of the camogie, the Senior Championship. Let's maybe have a roundup. I know a few games have been played in that championship. So I suppose, Rory, let's cut to the chase. The All Ireland prelim quarterfinal. We had Carlow and Offaly in the mix. I know last week when Kieran and myself were on, we'd kind of asked for maybe the two teams to be competitive. And I suppose Netwatch Cullen Park, it certainly was the case. But unfortunately for Offaly, the Thunder and Lightning wasn't the only thing that they had to contend with on that Saturday against Tipperary.
Yeah, and we kind of, we were having our own discussion about this prior to the games and kind of figured that Carlow might be the one to give the closer performance as well. Don't think Dublin are in the same league as Tipperary. And then also as well, like Carlow are a more physical team than Offaly. And when it comes to, being at home in a match like that, trying to ambush a team from the Leinster Championship, I think the physicality would be a big player in it. And look, up until 60 minutes, they were well in the game. Fell away badly in the last 10. Again, look, you probably the effort maybe to kind of hang in there, because there was a time where it stretched to 5 points and Carlow kind of, rallied again and got it back to 2, missed a chance to get it back to 1 point. And then Dublin went up and hit 2 or 3 quick points. And that was kind of the end of it from that point of view. But Carlow were really competitive. Big performances, from Chris Nolan, on Marty Kavanagh as well. Paddy Boland, who had done fierce damage in the Joe McDonagh final, like he was winning ball, like he's a great paw as we saw in that game. But like you could just see the difference of opposition against Offaly in the Joe McDonagh final. He had that space to cause damage. He scored 1-4 that day. Against Dublin, he was winning ball, but he was just snuffed out immediately. Couldn't offload the ball, couldn't get his shot away. And it just shows, if ever you wanted to see the difference between, how difficult it is to get a score against in the Joe McDonagh Championship compared to against a Dublin or Tipperary. I think that was evident in just the amount of ball he won, that he couldn't get a strike on. But look, positive from Carlow. But at the same time, then you had the opposite in Tullamore, where Offaly were, from after 5 minutes, like this game was dead and buried after 5 minutes. And it probably is more of an indicator of the real gulf, I think, between the Joe McDonagh and the top tier of counties. And it's strange, like this gulf seems to be growing. And it's something we'll have to get on to in a bit. Saying that, Offaly scored 318, which actually showed, showed good heart in the team, that they didn't completely fall away. Like 318 is a huge score. And in fact, before the game, if you were told that Offaly would score 318, you think, they'd be right in there. But like conceding 738, it's probably one of the biggest championship scores ever put up. So look, it was kind of definitely a kind of a Jekyll and Hyde between, if you're looking at both counties, as to the current format, is it worthwhile from an Offaly point of view? And Johnny Kelly himself came out afterwards and said he doesn't think that the current championship, the way it is, he thinks it needs a refix, and they benefited from going from Joe McDonagh straight into an All Ireland preliminary quarterfinal. Look, hard to gauge where Tip are after it, to be honest. Dublin probably got more of a game going into the quarterfinal in terms of getting players up to championship pace, because like Tipperary had the freedom of the park, their forwards, and that, as Claire found out in Ennis as well, if you give the Tip forwards any space at all, their striking is so clinical, ball to hand, that they will eventually end up with a guy able to stand, look and strike, to put the ball over the bar under no pressure, because they're so clever at picking out the loose player. So yeah, look, overall, it was disappointing for Offaly. I thought they're going to be closer than, I thought they were going to win handy, but I didn't think it was going to be, as fast a victory as it was. And Carlow as well, like they were right in there. Had they got a goal at that stage when they got it back to a point or two, who knows? Because Dublin were rattled. But in fairness to Dublin, they finished the game out strong. And I think the last 10 minutes from Dublin will give them a real kind of a bit of a jolt of confidence going down playing Clare. And because remember, against Galway, their last 10 minutes up in Croke Park in their previous game, they completely fell asunder. And so to finish the game so strong, I'm sure that was what was spoken about by Donoghue since that game. And look, they have, I suppose, with Sutcliffe, Boland, and of course Donald Burke in there, they do have players that can, really put scores up in the scoreboard. So Clare would have to be wary. In fairness, Carlow did shackle them as well fairly well. So yeah, look, going into it, look, we knew that it was going to be Dublin Tipperary. That's how it transpired, and I don't think that should be the case at this stage of championship, that you can just easily pick the two teams going through. The bookies odds said it all too, So
yeah. Like, look, I went to Tullamore, dodged the Thunder and Lightning in the second half, but I mean, to be perfectly fair, the golfing class there, Rory, from the first 10 minutes. Now, I think Tipperary probably with Liam Cahill and Michael Bevan's feedback and roaring before the game really did start incredibly well. Mark Keogh's goal, they were 1-7 to no score up before Offaly registered the score. 3-18 from turnover ball as well. And when you consider the likes of Jason Ford, Jake Morris chipped in with 2-18 combined. Yeah, I mean, it was just unfortunately for Offaly, I think the season really caught up with them. I don't think they're as bad a side as that. And speaking to a few locals there, they were a little bit stunned and surprised, but there was a few injuries to contend with, particularly Clancy with a rib injury during it. I know Nally basically had a fractured hand. Owen Cahill tears the hamstring, unfortunately, during the game. And they've had multiple ACLs here as well. So the squad depth here, the scheduling of 7 games, 7 weeks, and Joe McDonough, I think that all conspired. And I think a very motivated Tipperary team who've had a 3-week break. I think it just stars aligned, unfortunately, for Offaly. But I suppose, look, Carlow, 9 points from play during the 70 minutes, kind of told its whole story. I thought Dublin's backline was absolutely superb on the day, like Marty Kavanagh, Boland, as you say. Nolan did chip in with a few scores, and Nolan as well. But I mean, to be fair to Dublin, vastly improved perform in second half. Thought the run game destroyed Carlow, particularly in that final quarter. And we'd kind of highlighted that Carlow didn't really have the bench to call on in Joe McDonough Cup final when it was required. Didn't have anything. I think Mark Rogan from Dublin, though, was probably the talking point, I think, because he's a guy that I didn't really know much about. But I thought his movement for the goal at 40 minutes really was a key turning point. Keane O'Sullivan as well really did turn the screw as well. But look, in fairness to Carlow, all we expect him to do is give him a rattle. And so it proved. So I think from that perspective, at least in that watch, Cullen Park was competitive. Obviously, Offaly, Johnny Kelly has basically had his say. But I suppose here, Rory, heading into the off-season, let's say you're part of a GA committee that's reviewing the championship format here. How would you revamp the championship here to allow, and I kind of said it in my post on Facebook, you have teams in Joe McDonough now caught in no man's land. They're striving to get into Liam McCarthy, but they don't have the opportunity to play the top teams. I suppose, how would you revamp things?
Yeah, well, I don't think, to be honest, that the runner-up in the Joe McDonough should get into the All Ireland series. If you're going to have an incentive of Joe McDonough team being in the championship, and I'd say the reason when it first happened was to encourage teams that had a place in Leinster to step down, like your Laois and Offaly, teams that were traditionally in the Leinster Championship, that you had to have that incentive of, well, if you get to the Joe McDonough final, you're going to still have a rattle, at one of the bigger counties. So I presume that's why, in the original thinking, why the two Joe McDonough teams were there. I think having won the winning team, I think it's enough of an incentive. Yeah. I don't know if you lose, Joe McDonough should be brought in. So then the question is, which team plays them? So and it was a suggestion I've seen once or twice, and one of our own guy had during the week as well, was to bring in the National League winners, because one of the other biggest disappointments this year was the National League this year was the worst I can ever remember in terms of commitment of teams. Like, I can hand on heart say the only game that felt any bit with a bit of bite in it was the Waterford Tipperary match that, had a bit of championship bite. Every other game was just, a stroll out like. And so like it's, I know it's the fact it's kind of earlier in the year and because of the split season, but to give an incentive, if you're the National League champions, if they don't qualify from their province, then that they play the Joe McDonough champions. If they do qualify, then maybe the 4 team in that province, something like you might see in England sometimes for the Champions League places. If a team wins an FA Cup, then it goes down to the next team. It's something to think about. But first of all, I do think there has to be an incentive to win the league and bring that in with the championship, that the league champions, if they finish 4th or 5th in their group, that they would then play the Joe McDonagh champions in a preliminary quarter-final. That's one solution anyway.
Yeah.
Do you then put 4th and 5th in Leinster and Munster? Let's say the team then that doesn't qualify, do they play relegation semi-finals too? Have 2 relegation semi-finals to bring the Munster team in? Like, looking at it this year, I don't see how like Waterford, who finished bottom this year, like we're ever going to get relegated. But like maybe they should be playing a relegation one at the same time, and if they're good enough, they'll win it. So
Yeah.
So that's another factor too at the other end of things. I think the problem here, and Johnny Kelly, the manager of Offaly, touched on it afterwards, the championship needs revamping, but with Munster championship being so entertaining this year, like, to go at the championship, you have to go at both provinces, and the GAA won't want to touch the Munster championship. It's the revenue it took in this year from a financial point of view, the quality of the games. So why would you go at something that's so successful? And the reason they would have to go at it is because the Leinster Championship, at the moment, we said from the very start, Galway Kilkenny Leinster final, that's how it transpired. It's become too predictable. And there are teams, like, some people made a good argument that would Waterford or Cork this year, had they been in Leinster, have qualified as top 3. And I would absolutely think if either of them were in the Leinster Championship, they would have qualified top 3. So it is a bit uneven. But look, that's the nature of things. We had a few years ago there where you had a competitive Leinster Championship when Wexford and Dublin were turning over Galway and Kilkenny quite regularly, and Wexford beat Kilkenny this year, but just the fact they were already out of it, but then it was a relegation game for Wexford. With 2 rounds to go, like, Leinster was done and dusted, more or less. Whereas Munster went up to the last, like, seconds of injury time. So that's the dilemma for the GAA. If they want to revamp the whole thing, they're going to have to go at the provincial championships, and they won't want to touch the Munster championship. So how you reject they're limited then on what they can do. So you're looking at, I think, one team from Joe McDonagh, and maybe bring in your National League champion somehow into it. It would improve the league. Any team that gets to the semi-final of the league, whether by accident or not, will then really want to go out and win that league, just to be guaranteed that they're still in the championship.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Definitely, I think the relegation should be a part of it. The days of Leinster, the bottom team, going down, I think that needs to be rectified. As you say, if you're good enough, you'll stay up. So I think from that perspective, there should definitely be some sort of relegation playoff between the bottom 2 of each province to basically see who goes down. I mean, there has to be a focus. Unfortunately for Waterford, this is the second year here that they're down the bottom of the table. I think there needs to be a focusing on minds, and that would be quite clear in terms of a relegation dogfight to stay up. So I think from that perspective, it's fine. But I'm even thinking in terms of Joe McDonagh teams here, just in terms of the preseason, the league. Does the league even have to be looked at here? You know, you kind of have 1A, 1B, and 2A. Could you just amalgamate them all and basically divide into maybe different pools where you have home and away, and maybe you could split into 4 groups, top 2 go into a quarter final, bottom of each 4 groups get into a relegation playoff of some sort to maybe give. I'm just thinking of Carlow next year as well, Rory, because they're getting into Joe McDonagh Cup. They're now going to be playing 2A hurling. Again, we're kind of seeing now that there is a significant gap here. So I'm just wondering here in terms of the league organisers, can we experiment? Can we try out things even for a year, 2 year here? Johnny Kelly's basically said loud and clear, they need more exposure to the bigger counties. Yes, there will be considerable losses, but they need to learn. They need to get to grips with the standard here. And I think the Joe McDonagh is a great competition. I would leave that as is. But I think definitely in the league, I think the competitive standards would definitely be elevated here to a certain degree. If you had maybe kind of a combination of the high caliber teams with some of the teams in Joe McDonagh sprinkled in, you know, and even if you kind of based it on rankings or seeds of some sort, the way that's happening at the moment in the football. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one here for the GAA organisers, but they definitely have to do something because definitely with that Offaly performance, it really does kind of bring out everyone out there, unfortunately.
And Mark, if you're a Joe McDonagh team next year in management and you're looking at the team that won it this year, Carlow, and you're saying, what was their blueprint? Like, Carlow went into the league this year and there was games where they were beaten by Kildare by, was it nearly 20 points in one match?
So 25 points in the first round. Yeah.
They paid no attention to the league and ended up winning Joe McDonagh. So if that's your blueprint, then there's something wrong with the league. So it does have to be touched on. or does have to be fixed next year as well. And Johnny Kelly, I think, got it right too. Like, how can Offaly play Division 2 or for the league, then play Joe McDonagh, and then be expected to go out against Tipperary? And all of a sudden, a team that have not played at that standard in like over maybe 2 years and put in a big performance at home, it's just not right. So make the league more of an incentive in the league and include these teams. Any team from Joe McDonagh up should be playing whatever way you start out your groups. As you said, you'd end up with maybe 16 teams. Then go with your 4 groups of 4. Keep everybody involved then into some sort of get a fourth game into quarterfinals, and then let it split into teams going for the league title and then teams trying to avoid relegation. Take it from there. But you'd still end up with each team getting minimum 4 games that way. Most teams will get 5, and I think they'd be quite happy. A lot of counties, 4 games would be enough for looking at the way teams approach it the last few years. But as we mentioned, get to the knockout stages and you're going to want to go for the title. You have an incentive now. And don't get to the knockout stages and you'll still have a meaningful game. Nobody will want to be relegated either. So,
And I think you touched upon the league champions as well. I think I fully agree with you there. There's been enough like cat and mouse, almost, real kind of chess, like not showing full hands, but certain counties do endorse the league by putting the county league winners into a quarter-final or into a last 16 of a county championship. I think that incentive certainly would need to be looked at here as well, even if it's the runners-up, even if you're going down to even a semi-final level, just even to kind of get the ladder, like in the AFL, or even if you had round-robin games here to kind of lead into your All-Ireland prelim, so be it. So I think the league needs a little bit of credence here, given the cat and mouse. Now, 2A was far different, but 1A, 1B, geez, we can count them probably in one hand and even less than 2 fingers, probably the real standout games during the league, really, to be perfectly honest here, Rory. But look, all for GA organisers, and I think there's plenty of hurling minds out there, and I would hope that the GA president, the GA commission or competitions committee really do have a look at the hurling calendar, because even the Joe McDonagh Cup, 7 games in 7 weeks. I mean, that's going to rip squad depth charts left, right and centre. And I mean, Johnny Kelly did mention it in the post-game interview that the horrific injuries that Offaly sustained during the year, and these weren't like, kind of an ankle sprain. These are significant injuries, like the hamstring tear for Owen Cal, even ACLs, even during the start of the season. I think, to be perfectly fair to GA scheduling here, they have to be fair to the teams that are trying to get to the Lee McCarthy level. They're not giving them a chance. Like even Carlow, you saw in the last 10 minutes, they ran out of steam, and obviously the calendar, the scheduling did catch up with them as well. So I think GA organisers, you have to give fair play to teams that are going to enter into this competition and give them the supports required. And that certainly I don't think happened this year, and even last year. Like, apart from Laois against Dublin in an All-Ireland qualifier, who else has really sprung an upset? It's always been kind of the routine, kind of more than 8-10 point loss.
That's been the only one. Antrim last year gave Cork a game up in Carrigan Park.
Yeah, gave him a rattle as well, yeah.
Very similar to the Carlow Dublin game. They stayed with him for 60 minutes and fell away. But to give a team a rattle for 60 minutes and then to actually bring it home are 2 completely different things. And just to have that bench and just the ability and to finish out games like that, you need to be playing these teams. You need to figure out ways of staying with them in the last 10 minutes. And by not getting a chance to play them until maybe 12 months' time again, it's just the league is a perfect opportunity to do that. I think, but like putting them up, as you said, Joe McDonagh is a great competition to kind of promote these teams already into a championship. When they're not there yet, either you're going to end up with like cricket score games if it isn't done correctly. It has to be. But look, and Donald O'Cusick touched on this as well. The GAA really need to invest in these counties that aren't far off. Antrim probably still need that, like with the population, and Belfast and like Antrim really have the population resources at hand with the Casement Park coming and everything like that to make the next step. But again, they need GAA's help here. They need a huge effort in terms of getting coaching in their secondary schools, for example. Like I can't remember any Ulster team really being competitive at all in the in the Crow Cup, and like that's something they have to look at as well, because as we know, secondary school success, as we saw with Tulla and Clare underage, like it links hand in hand. Ard Sculreach and Limerick school as well. Thurles CVS, De La Salle a few years ago at Waterford being successful, and suddenly Waterford were winning All Ireland under 21 a couple of years later. Look, it's something that they have to target as well, and Dunlog is right. Like there are counties that will just need like a huge, and it has to be done over a period of years where huge investment is put in there to get hurling up. Some of these counties as well, like let's say they're split dual counties, and this is probably a snobbish hurling point of view, but they're never going to be successful in football. Like they're not, like they're closer in hurling and they don't realise it. You know, they're up against, like we're talking about some Leinster counties like Dublin and like Kildare are getting stronger all the time. Underage football, Meath have been on a period where they've been a sleeping giant for a few years. Like, so I just getting harder and harder. Whereas in hurling, like there isn't that many counties for them, and they're not that far down the pecking order at all whatsoever. It'll just take real effort and investment. Like we've seen it with Offaly underage already, how in a few years you can start competing against these counties again and winning, Leinster titles underage, getting to All Ireland finals. Clare showed how quickly it can turn around as well, even though in the last few years, Clare have, more of attrition in some of these things, but Clare were in the doldrums underage and win that Ireland minor this year and being the Munster under-20 final. So it can happen really quickly with the right structures in place.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you there. Look, I think there needs to be a significant retrospective in terms of the season as a whole here. I think it's no good just to say continue with the norms here. We've announced 1A, 1B. I think there's always time to change, and particularly the start of the year, just to basically change it up. And you'd hope, as I said here earlier on in this podcast, that we can literally have some good hurling minds like Donal Logue or Jackie Tyrrell or guys of that stature to come in and make proposals here, and let's kind of experiment. Let's try them out here and see how to get more counties involved here. That's the whole key. I'm just thinking in terms of the Joe McDonagh Cup. If there's no structures in place here, Rory, the unfortunate thing is that these counties will lose interest fairly quickly. The goodwill, the hurling community, and in terms of football being, as you say, 50-50, if there's a little bit of success in the football, that the hurling takes the back seat. So I think it's imperative for the GA and Croke Park really to kind of really focus minds here, for sure. But look, for Tipperary, on to play Galway in the TUS Gaelic grounds. Dublin facing Clare. This is going to be an absolutely sensational Saturday in the TUS Gaelic grounds this weekend here, Rory. I suppose we can start probably with the first game, which is Clare-Dublin. I suppose Clare coming off that 1 point loss to Limerick. I mean, an awful lot of positives there. They've had the 2 week to regroup against Dublin, who I think the second half performance from Micheál O'Donoghue, I think probably was satisfying and pleasing. They got a good enough test against Carlow. So, I mean, from a Clare perspective here, Rory, what are the vibes coming out of the county after the Munster final, and what are you expecting on Saturday night?
Yeah, I suppose looking back, comparing this to last year's Munster final, last year Clare lost the game by 3 points after extra time, and we're kind of getting all these kudos and lots of praise. And as a player, that probably hurt you a bit, that like you lost the game, like moral victories that are worth nothing, and in the end this year lost by a point, and it's like there's the opposite. They're not getting the same, the same love from people. It's it was a game that was there for the taking. Probably should have crossed the line with the chances they had. The only thing I'd say is, like, they've lost the game, and you can easily identify the areas that need to be worked on. Sometimes you lose a match and you're going, God, because small little things might have cost you. But in this, like, it was easy to identify, like, the shot selection, especially a bit of panic in the last 10 minutes when they need to get scores on the board as well. Also, like, getting the matchups wrong from a management point of view. As you went through last week on the podcast as well, like getting matchups wrong as well was another issue. And look, that's just something that you can clearly see how to improve from 1 week to another. If they can, getting that improvement is another thing. But I'd sooner be that way in a management, that it's easily to identify what needs to be fixed, rather than trying to figure out what went wrong. Is a harder situation. So in both Clare's defeats so far, in the Tipperary game, it was the same thing. You could easily identify what needed to be fixed. And in fairness, they said about that over the rest of the round robin, like they definitely were improving match and match. Yeah, what probably struck me a bit about the Munster final was Limerick weren't at their best, and Clare weren't at their best either. Clare hadn't performed, I thought, as well as they had in some of the other games, and it was still there to be won at the very end and didn't get over the line. But from, like, Dublin going to be dangerous. Like, you have 3 scores there. You have Cian Boland with his pace can cause huge problems. Donal Burke, as we know, a phenomenal scorer. and Danny Sutcliffe as well can be, one of these mercurial players, can be brilliant, at times. Like if those three hit form together, and for example, Kelly and O'Donnell have an off day at the other end, or even a red card or something, Clare could be in trouble. But I don't see it. Like, I think if we now come out and don't perform after being so consistent in Munster, like we still reached a level of performance in the Munster final that put us within a point of winning it against, a team that were 1-5 in a row. Like, so we're Clare right up there, but we have to now build on that and get stronger through the All Ireland Championship this year. And the first step is on Saturday. And look, a lot of people are delighted from Clare, Galway and Tipperary with the venue. Dublin seem to be the one crowd who are, have obviously the furthest to travel down. I think they seem to forget though that we're making that journey anytime we get to the Ireland semi-final or final or whatever. Like the whole country goes to Dublin for games, so no harm to give their hurling supporters a championship match down in Limerick for a change. I can't remember the last time Dublin played a championship game below in Limerick, so you'd hope that they'll bring a big following as well. It should be a huge feast of hurling. Like, you're looking at Galway and Tipperary as well. We should get on to it in a minute. Like, just so hard to predict the winner there. But I think the first game, like, it's the easier one to predict. Clare should win this game, and I would be thinking like they really need to put in a big performance now as well. It's kind of needed. It's needed. They need to show this year, like, that what happened last year, won't happen again, that they've learned from it and that they're, building on it. The only thing from Clare point of view as well is, I know David Reedy was back playing with a rogue last week, so they didn't pick up any major injuries against Limerick. There wasn't extra time, so they've had 2 weeks to regroup. They've had that extra week to maybe look at Dublin now and go back through their Leinster games, identify areas of strengths and weaknesses. Like, you're looking, even that you learn so much from watching the Galway game as to their threats from the first half, and where Galway really got at him in the second half as well. And I'd still think as well that if Clare in a situation like against Wexford last year, where it comes down to the last few minutes, I just think from what we've seen from Dublin so far, like, their bench will be nowhere near as strong as Clare's. So Clare need to keep calm if they're in a situation where they're facing Dublin are right in there with a few minutes to go. You'd think that we should finish stronger as well. And even having that extra week off, because Dublin, got a tough game down in Carlow last week, should make a big difference as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Roy. I suppose looking at injury news here, myself and Kieran Collins did kind of feel an awful lot of sympathy for Cian Nolan in terms of that full-back slot for Clare. What's the situation with Conor Cleary at the moment, Rory? Do you feel that he'll make it? And if he doesn't, who's going to be the option to fill in for Cleary if he's not fit?
Yeah, well, when the initial injury came, we heard it was, he dislocated his shoulder. You're thinking like 6 weeks, is if there isn't a surgery needed, which doesn't seem to be the case, that he didn't need any surgery. You're thinking like 6 weeks for things to get knitted together. It's an injury I suffered myself a few times, like, and to hear that he was back training for the Munster final now. Being training, like, could be him jogging up and down the sideline as well, as opposed to actually taking full part in training. So, and seeing him named as a team, we all thought, a miracle had happened and his shoulder had mended in 3 weeks as opposed to 6. This kind of puts him at 5 weeks. So I would say he's, like, for traditional, he's 1 week too early. Are you going to risk him, or are you maybe going to, if he's in an okay situation that he can get through warm and everything fine, are you going to maybe keep him in reserve if needed and hope not to have to use him at all? Like, as we saw, Shane Murray did well when he came in the last day. You can start Shane or Paul Flanagan rejig the backs around a bit as well. Like, Cian Nolan would do a fine in a certain type of player as well. Trying to mark Aaron Gillane with 45 yards of space in front of him is difficult for any cornerback. Probably, like, will deserve a chance again to show that he is up to it. Like, I just felt, as you said there, felt sorry for him, because even when he got a yellow card, you'd be thinking, like, you make a switch or you make a substitution at that stage. But to leave him there with a yellow card on, there isn't much you can do if the forward wins the ball then and is going through and goal and you're on a yellow card, because you're going to get sent off if you make the next foul. So look, there is a couple of things that's one thing Clare have to fix, is if Conor Cleary isn't there, they need the full back line to be a lot more solid, and they need a half back line to give a lot more cover as well. And it is an area, like, as we mentioned, Dublin's main threats are that pace with Boland, Birkenside as well, Grogan, as you pointed out as well. So look, they have it's definitely, they can definitely cause Clare huge problems, but I think Clare need to be thinking of setting up themselves properly and improve from there. So I'd be surprised if Conor Cleary starts, but he might make the match day squad all right and be kept in reserve if really needed.
To be fair to Dublin, an awful lot of things have to go right for him on the day. I think with Clare, now the 2-week break, we've seen with the 3-week break how Tipperary got invigorated, energised last weekend. I know it was against Offaly, but I thought their level of performance and their intensity was through the roof. I can see the same here for Clare particularly. Now for Dublin, I think it's going to be the middle third where they're going to have to really dictate play here. Burke at half-back seems to be a focal point in terms of those short puckouts. I would say in terms of Sutcliffe, like a Crummy here. Donald Burke, obviously, on the freeze is unairing. We've talked about him at length, haven't we, during this podcast series. You know, he is probably one of the de facto all-stars right now if we kind of stop the season right now. But I think in terms of that middle third, I think Clare should hold aces here. I think Colin Malone had an outstanding Munster final. If he continues that kind of vein of form, you look at Shane O'Donnell as well against Owen O'Connell here as well. I think from that perspective, the movement of this Clare forward line is going to be quite significant, I think, for Dublin. Now, in fairness to Dublin, they're coming to the ground here in Gaelic grounds. The surface is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the redevelopment of the Gaelic grounds has just been absolutely, completely world-class. I think from that perspective, that will revel into Clare forward line in terms of their pace, their movement. I can see big moments here for Tony Kelly as well. And look, I think for Dublin, they showed it against Galway, particularly in that last round-robin game. They had a good 45 minutes, but again, as you said, when the questions were asked for Galway, when they pushed up on the puck out, there really wasn't anything there. And they can't really go 15-20 minutes here against Clare, particularly in that second half without responding. So, look, I think Clare will be warm favourites. I think the only thing here is if Dublin change it up a little bit, go a little bit direct into the full back line, maybe Sutcliffe, maybe big man up front, just maybe test out the Clare full back line. But I think that's kind of a long shot. I think you'd think Brian Lohan, James Moore, and the Clare management will have already sussed that out and maybe identify that person in. Look, I think we talked last week, Rory, about David McInerney being potentially that kind of take one for the team, go back to the full back, you know, and just basically after that, then hopefully Conor Cleary's back for an All-Ireland semi-final. But I'll be with you here. I think Clare hold the aces here. And really, I think it's all for Dublin to really prove and impress on Saturday. I suppose the second match here, Rory, is the one that I think an awful lot of people have been looking forward to for quite a long time. A resurgent Tipperary against a Galway team that had the Leinster title, Bob O'Keefe, there until Killian Buckley thought otherwise with that last-minute goal in the Leinster hurling final. We have two teams here that have a historic rivalry. I'd say the banter around Bursakane and Porttown has been fierce this week. I think this has fireworks written all over it here. I think Galway, the motivation here to beat Tipperary, I have no problem in saying that Galway will be well up for this game. How do you feel this game will go?
Yeah, so comparing it to the first game where you've Dublin kind of coming down with a free hit, let's say, not expected to win, and this is completely different. Like, these are both teams that will be expecting to win, will be full of confidence in their own way. Going back to Galway, I think what we saw from Galway in the first 10 minutes of the Leinster final, and also that period in the second half where they came from a 6-7 point deficit to lead by 2, that was some of the best hurling, if not the best hurling we've seen in the championship.
Yeah.
But they have these lulls. After that first 10 minutes, they went in a huge lull where Kilkenny just ate them for the next 10. So Galway have to find a balance here where they're, you know, where they can't afford this spells and games where they just switch off completely. We saw against Dublin as well in the first half where it was just dire stuff. Now, a lot of that I thought against Dublin was maybe a small bit of, I don't want to say arrogance, but kind of overconfidence where they're, you know, like we saw TJ Brennan playing the ball back across his own goal and to be cut out, like stuff like that you wouldn't imagine they'd dare do against Kilkenny. So they learned a lesson that day. I don't know. I have a feeling here that Galway are going to win this game. I'm going to say this again with Tipperary. I'm not fully sold on them yet. Resurgent, yes. Much improved from last year, yes. But they had one win in the Munster Championship up in Ennis, where Clare gave them 2 or 3 goals at the start of the game. Now, Tip hurled really well that day as well. And as I mentioned, their crispness and everything, like they managed the lead really well. Then after that, like the Waterford performance is a big worry for me because they threw away a Munster final place there with a no-show against Waterford. Home game, big tip crowd there in Thurles, and to perform like that, it gives big question marks. Are Galway a better team than Waterford? I think so. Tip are going to be obviously much improved from that performance, and the fact that the Offaly game turned into a bit of a shootout, I don't think helps them. I just think Galway here I think Galway have played in that Leinster final, those 2 spells have been the best hurling we've seen, as I said. And if they can extend that and bring it, I just fancy Galway here. I think the Conor Cooney is hitting for Conor Cooney inside. Brian Concannon, hitting form there from the last day. They're starting to, a lot of their bigger players are coming into it, starting to hit form the right time after being, having a on and off during the Leinster Championship. Conor Whelan was excellent the last day, and I don't know, Tip are going to have to really come up with a plan for Conor Whelan, and I don't know, I'm just looking through the Tip backline thinking who would you put in them, and I'm sure Liam Cahill and Michael Beavens know this best, but putting the correct man on him and stopping him are 2 different things, and when he's in this form, he's close to unstoppable. So yeah, look, I'm going to give Galway a bit of a nod here. If Tipperary go and beat Galway, they're absolute All-Ireland contenders for me, but for me, they need that big win. They need that big win to show that they're right up there as contenders. And this would be it if it happens for them. But what a game to look forward to. I'm just hoping that Clare do the business so I can enjoy the second match.
Oh, well, sure. Look, hopefully, I think from a Clare perspective, it should be. But I think going back to Galway and Tipperary, there are question marks on both sides. I would say, even from a Galway perspective, that middle third, as you said, likes of Blanchfield and Kilkenny halfback, really did have a great game. When you considered the Kilkenny injuries that happened in the lead up to that game, I think it was rather key that, there was a bit of a lull here. Again, Dahi Burke at halfback was being pulled out of position here, maybe isolating Gerard McInerney a little bit too much. But as you say, those cameos give Galway a bit of optimism. And I think if you run at this Tipperary backline, good things will happen. And I think the way that they actually ran through Kilkenny at times should be a bit of a confidence boost here for Galway for sure. Like I said, Kevin Cooney as well has really come into his own the last few days. Games here with a few good points. Conor Whelan, timely intervention in Leinster hurling final. I mean, it's probably going to be Breen, the fullback here. Barry Heffernan's not in the panel from what I can gather. So, I mean, fullback options. Brian O'Mara was tried. Desi Hutchison kind of gave him the run around in the last round-robin game. So, I think Craig Morgan comes back in a corner back, but then had a hamstring cramp. So, I mean, from that perspective, I think there is question marks. Brian Concannon's a great foil for Conor Whelan inside. I think for Tipperary's wise, I think it's going to be the movement of the forward line particularly. Can they basically expose the likes of Dahi Burke and Gerard McInerney here? Because if they can, I think they've shown repeatedly here, you give them the space, particularly when Clare did in the first game in the round robin, Offaly to their cost last weekend. There's no better team in the country than Tipperary to rack up scores. I mean, Liam Cahill has basically challenged his side to score 30 points now for the rest of the season. I think for Galway, that is going to be the target here, really, to try to nullify. And to be perfectly honest, I think Galway have stabilised Jack Grealish from Gort in a cornerback. I think that's a given here. I would say now, in terms of that half-back line of Galway and Joseph Cooney as well, really protecting that full-back line at given stages. So, look, I think it's going to be a phenomenal setup. Again, going to be very hard one to call here. I think the Galway mindset, if this was anyone else, I think they may have come in with a bit of an indifferent attitude. The fact that they're going to see blue and gold across from them to US Gaelic grounds will inspire them no end. There's an awful lot of hype here in Galway in terms of this game and the response. I think there is a performance here. I generally do from Galway, but equally, I think Tipperary have to back up, as you say, key marquee win here and against a Limerick side that are going to know full well in terms of round robin what Tipperary was capable of. I think I'm just going to hedge it here to Galway. I think just purely because being battle hard. And I think the Offaly game, no disrespect to Offaly, is going to do no favours. But the fact that Offaly did score 318 here would indicate to me still fundamental problems in this backline. And particularly Dan McCormack getting sin binned right at the end, I think really did kind of indicate to me here, is there a problem here, particularly in the wing-back positions for Tipperary? I'm thinking of Kevin Cooney here. I'm thinking of Joseph Cooney with runs from deep here. because when Galway did impose their will against Kilkenny, it was that run game. And I think Henry Shefflin will be imploring that in Galway to really start attacking. Tom Monaghan, attack from deep. So I think from that perspective, I think I will go for Galway, but I think it's going to be an absolute classic here. And, I think Limerick beware whoever comes out of it. I mean, if Galway come into it, they have no fear of Limerick, given the recent historical history. And Tipperary against Limerick, their local derby game. So, look, you can throw out the form window. That's it.
Yeah, I think the confidence of whatever team wins this, because this is a huge game going into a semi-final. And again, there's a 2-week break. It's not. It gives you a chance to recover as well. But bringing that confidence in from winning this game, this is a huge game for both counties. Look, they're both All Ireland contenders. Like, we can't say Tip did go toe to toe with Limerick. It's just a fact. And over the last 2 championships, they've won one win on the board. Now, saying that, they were competitive in every game once, apart from the Waterford match. From a Galway point of view, Noel McGrath has been the engine of this Tipperary team this year. He's been sensational midfield. And when he gets on ball, his delivery is so good. Galway have to, if they can shut down Noel McGrath and shut off a lot of his delivery, it saves a lot of the the problems inside with Morris and Callan and Ford. So that's something I'm sure that Henry Shefflin will be trying to make a war zone of that middle third and win that battle. And then, as you said, running at them seems to be a strength. Jason Flynn for me is an enigma, because I like Jason Flynn, and I think we had that famous game a few years ago against Waterford where they were being annihilated. Jason Flynn came on and turned the whole thing. And I just don't think he gets a fair go with Galway. Even when he came on the last day, I thought he brought a bit of life to them again, to the forward line. I think he's hard done by in Galway. And I think surely he deserves a start at this stage. For me, there's been a certain couple of players in Galway that seem to start all the time, regardless of how well they're going, based on maybe previous performances where they shot the lights out 4 or 5 years ago. I just think that Shefflin needs to kind of pick guys that are going well rather than reputations, and I think that's starting to maybe happen now. Cathal Mannion, as we know, hasn't hit the heights of last year or the year before yet, but that can happen. Galway have match winners. You look at Mannion, Monaghan, as we mentioned there, Flynn inside, Cooney as well. He's been very good to win his own ball as well. Joseph Cooney, and also who really stood up when they were in trouble. Look, Galway have scores all over the pitch. As you said, the worry is their backline at the minute. Shipped a massive score in the first half against Dublin, dragged all over the place. Same against Kilkenny at times. And I know halfbacks want to get forward, but I think the Galway half-back line have this, they need to be held back almost. They have this urge to kind of get forward too much and leave huge space in when things get turned over. It's just something that, on paper, you're looking there and you're seeing, Burke, the two Burke, Dahi Burke, Fintan Burke there, and you had Mannion. And you're saying, geez, you're saying on paper, what a half-back line here. And then you've Joseph Cooney to slap back in half-back as well when things are, and you're saying, but they haven't really, I didn't see them dominating there against Kilkenny. So it's just something that they need to, they have to dominate that puck out if Tipperary are going along the next day, and it'll give Galway a platform, to attack from. But again, look, as we know, Tipperary can really hurt you, give them space. Limerick is a big pitch as well. Tipperary probably more used to it of late, playing in Limerick than Galway have been, and it's such a hard one to call. Really looking forward to it, and it really is this is your knockout championship starting from the round robin that starts with this weekend. Clare Dublin, you're going to have by the end of Saturday, you could potentially have Clare out of the championship. I know we don't think that might happen. And you're going to have Galway or Tip out. Whoever wins that game, as we said, will straight away be promoted as All Ireland contenders. So it just shows the importance of it, and can't wait for it, really.
Yeah, no, it's getting real now, isn't it? There's no backdoor anymore. There's no next day out salvaging a round robin result to save your season. I think it's now do or die, and I think even from a Galway perspective, I'm thinking of, let's say conceivably, if Galway were to get knocked out by Tipperary now, this is a tough conversation between the Galway County Board and Henry Shefflin, year 2 of a year 3 programme. Where is it going? I mean, the All-Ireland semi-final last year was seen as progress and an awful lot of high hopes here. If there was to be a loss to Tipperary here, I think there will be speculation here in terms of maybe will both parties kind of terminate by mutual consent. So I think for Shefflin, he'll leave no stone unturned, but I think it's the Galway mindset here. If they're on the money, from the get-go. I think it is, there for them. But again, this Tipperary threat, like Liam Cahill and Michael Bevins, year one, obviously, of their managerial reign, I think they do need the marquee result here to really kind of fundamentally kind of review their season with satisfaction. That if they got to an All-Ireland semi-final, they're live threats. I think it's a free hit then against Limerick, because I think, all the pressure will be on Limerick to deliver a win in the All-Ireland semi-final. But I think that'll be a fantastic game. I think there'll be plenty of goals between these two, really, because the way the two half-back lines do like to express themselves, space will be opened up in front of the Galway full forward and Tipperary full forward line. And I think it is going to be a magnificent fixture, really. So, and again, the surface in the Gaelic grounds is just phenomenal here. So I think for like Gearóid Hegarty or McInerney or even Michael Breen here, I think it could be a busy evening here, because, I mean, the quality of ball that could be coming in to both these full back lines is going to be pretty testing, to say the least.
Yeah, I just think like both teams' strengths are going forward with their they've serious forwards. Like, if you were like to meet a random person in the street and ask like name 3 Galway players, name 3 tip players, are going to shoot 3 forwards at you, like, because like that's where the stars are. So yeah, I agree. It's going to be a real high scoring game, an absolute shootout, I'd say. But but at the same time, it will be that team that does get that edge defensively, that can close the space down, that's probably going to come through. So for all the shooting at one end, it'll be that team that'll just tighten things up in their own defence.
And I think it's a big game for both goalkeepers here, Rory. We haven't alluded to it, but like Éanna Murphy and also Rhys Shelley, who's come in and hasn't put a foot wrong for Tipperary. I think the puck out distribution is going to be absolutely key. And I think for certain opposition, like Éanna Murphy's distribution has evolved in the last few seasons, but I've been equally impressed by Rhys Shelley in terms of his accuracy, in terms of restarts here. I think that's going to be a key aspect on the game, because I know Tipperary will like to really go at it, quick restarts. So I think for both teams here, it'll be imperative of their goalkeepers to get the radar on fairly quickly. And I'm even thinking of Brian O'Mara here, getting some quick early ball from Rhys Shelley, like what's from Éanna Murphy here. So I think that'll be a fascinating battle in terms of the puck outs won here, because I think Galway would revel in the high ball going in, but I don't think Tipperary are going to do that. I think they're going to try to run through the lines that they have been doing, try to get Jason Ford in a roving role, similar to Conor Cooney. So I think there's something intriguing subplots here. I generally do. So look, I think fireworks, but I think we're tipping Galway just on the base of the battle-hardened display so far, is it, in the Leinster campaign, and just Tipperary kind of maybe injuries kind of coming home to roost.
What's the story with Cathal Barrett? Mark, have you heard anything up in Tullamore the last day?
Well, there was kind of rumours that he would be featuring, but like, I think to be perfectly fair, it just shows the magnitude of the injury he sustained against Limerick, this HIA and just everything else. Now, again, this was now there was rumour mill in terms of a challenge game that was played behind closed doors, maybe a week or two before that Waterford game, that there was a few injuries there. So I think the likes of Bonner didn't feature. So there was one or two kind of notable absentees in that Tipperary's panel. I think the assumption here is that the majority will come back. I think Cathal Barrett being one of them. I think he should have recovered at this stage. I think now we're, week 4, week 5 after that Limerick game. So I think from that perspective, if he's not back, then I think, that's kind of telling the tale of the tape here. But he's definitely required on Saturday night from a Tipperary perspective. It's great to see Craig Morgan back, because even his cameo at 50 minutes, he did show the pace. He just showed, complete upgrade here. And no disrespect to Johnny Ryan here either as well. But I think it's just shown the depth and strength here, particularly in that cornerback situation here for Tipperary. But yeah, Cathal Barrett has to be in.
Yeah, if he's not, Cathal Barrett, straight away, you've somebody to immediately try and Conor Whelan,
Exactly. Just the type marking that he's done it before, he'll do it again. But I think all indications from Tullamore was that Tipperary fans were relatively confident that Cathal Barrett would be back for a quarter-final, and I think maybe that's probably the line from Cahill and Bevins, even though I don't think it was mentioned in post-game, really, to be honest, but there was other injuries at play here as well that should have cleared up anyway. I think there was more precautionary, and I think given the thunder and torrential downpours in Tullamore on Saturday, I think it was probably better off for those Tipperary guys to just take that match off, to be perfectly honest. I suppose we're kind of leading into that quarter-final, into the semi-final, and news this week here, Rory, in terms of Declan Hannon. Limerick have come out immediately. Declan Hannon unavailable for the All-Ireland hurling semi-final, a big blow again. I'm thinking in terms of Sean Finn. I'm thinking in terms of Cian Lynch, who's on the road to recovery here. But I suppose, Rory, another injury for Limerick to contend with going into an All-Ireland semi-final against a potential buoyant Galway or Tipperary in 3 weeks' time. I suppose, your thoughts there?
Yeah, and first thing, of course, is to wish Declan Hannon well in his recovery.
Yeah.
Just hearing word during the week that it could be, that even a All-Ireland final might be, too close. It seems to be a serious injury. From a Limerick point of view, already having Sean Finn missing, it does give a headache in terms of, and really tests the depth. I suppose if you're looking at options as to what to do next, I suppose there's 2 or 3 options. During the game the last day, Kyle Hayes went to centre back and Colin Coughlin came in at left half back. Wonder there, for me, what you're missing is you're missing Kyle Hayes has more freedom on the wing, as we saw against Clare, to rampage forward, and just that pace as well to stay with runners as they try and break the tackle past them. And I just thought as well that David Fitzgerald was kept really quiet. Like Kyle Hayes was winning that battle all ends up, and then last 10-15 minutes suddenly David Fitzgerald's 2 points and should have had another one dropped short and started to win ball and cause problems on that side of the field. For me, Colin Coughlin's superb hurler. I've seen loads of them, had him in underage development squads, and also I've seen him playing a good bit in UL too, serious striker of the ball, and does offer a good bit going forward as well. You're just wondering, is he a bit of experience to put in at 6 and leave Kyle at 7? That's maybe the question John Kiley is wondering looking back, because you are losing Kyle Hayes as attacking agent in the wing. Another option, of course, is Richie English come in the full back line. Mike Casey go back to his natural full back position, and Dan Morrissey out to 6, where he has played a lot of hurling as well in the past. So there are a couple of options from it'll be one of those 2 that he'll go with. I don't see him, I don't see a Cian Nolan coming from nowhere here. It's it's going to be a more conservative approach, I think, and he'll go with tried and trusted. Again, another factor here as well, Mark, is who they'll be playing. And he might have different plans in terms of matchups as to whether you're playing Galway or whether you're playing Tipperary, based on what kind of defender you might need in that situation. So that'll be a factor too, I think. So look, it's a huge blow to Limerick to lose, 2 of your 6 defenders. It really puts pressure. And there's fairness, I thought the backs responded really well in the Munster final to Sean Finn's injury. Even the last 10 minutes, you're looking at 2 blockdowns and Kelly, just every, and a lot of it, I spoke about Clare's misses. A lot of those misses were because they were being put under pressure on the shot. They weren't given that chance, space to slide it over. So look, that was a huge part of it as well. And I don't know if the Limerick backs got the credit they deserved, for the nuisance, they caused when they didn't win possession in the last 10 minutes the last day. So look, it is a big factor. Did it coincide with Clare kind of coming from 5 points down back to 1 at the end, that injury to Hannon? Hard to know, hard to say as well, because it was Kyle Hayes, when he did go to 6, made a couple of those significant blocks. So had he been out at wing back at the time, we wouldn't know. Maybe there could have been scores. So, but overall, yeah, look, it does test the depth again. Should Limerick ship another injury in the back line, you really are then going to players that haven't had a lot of game time. You're going back, Aaron Costello hasn't featured in the championship this year. You are kind of going, or maybe then are you looking at bringing Will O'Donoghue back a bit further? I know at the time, it's just funny, Declan Hannon, when he has got injured, they've done different things in the past. I remember against Cork one year, Will O'Donoghue went back in at 6 down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Then when Declan Hannon got injured against Kilkenny, Kyle Hayes went immediately in at 6 up in 2019. So they have done different things, but I'm sure it'll be a number of factors at play, and I think opposition will be one of them. And also as well, just do you want to upset the team too much to make 2 or 3 switches when one switch could be required if you can put a guy directly in at 6?
Yeah, no, I think it's great points there, Rory, and I think really depending on the All-Ireland semi-final opponent for Limerick, I think Paul Kinnerk and John Kiley will have the approach. The other curveball I may throw out here, obviously Dan Morrissey at 6. He's such a talisman for that Limerick back line. His versatility, he can go corner, wing back, full back. Jesus, he's full package in terms of that. I think that could be easy slot in if we needed Kyle Hayes to maraud up forward like he has been doing. But also Barry Nash, that could be the other kind of talking point. He is a playmaker. If we're going to orchestrate from the back, maybe Barry Nash is that guy. Now then you kind of have to identify someone to fill in that corner back berth as well. So there is options, but again, as you say, 2 of the starting 6 backs here are now out for Limerick. So it will be opportunity knocks here for whoever comes through this quarterfinal between Galway and Kilkenny, certainly. But I think Limerick, it's next man in, isn't it? That's the mantra. So it will be tested. And, when I heard the press release, it's like, okay, at least that is being released now. There's no real speculation on Declan Hannon now. So I think the team can really knuckle down and focus on a performance here in 2 weeks' time. I said 3 weeks' time earlier on before the start of this kind of segment. But I think from that perspective, I think it's an intriguing subplot again for this Limerick season to see how they overcome adversity here, because I think certain teams will definitely target the half back of Limerick, whoever it is. But also I felt, Declan Hannon in certain weeks here in the season, the run game, particularly Clare in the Munster final, did try to exploit Declan Hannon, particularly down that middle of the defence here. And I think maybe Declan Hannon may not have been 100% here for maybe the last few weeks. And I think it's now the acknowledgement here that there is a fundamental problem and it needs to be sorted out, and wish Declan Hannon all the best. Like, what a leader. And, again, his experience, particularly on match day, will be pivotal here. He will be part of the match day squad, obviously. But again, it's a huge blow for Limerick. It's no point in underestimating it here, for sure. But I think that'll be an intriguing talking point that we'll probably focus in on the next week or two, Rory, for sure. I suppose finally, Rory, action-packed again tonight. The Camogie Championship is kind of well underway here. I suppose you have the third level colleges with the University of Limerick this year. So you've kind of a good interest in terms of how the championship is going. So maybe you can fill in the viewers here in terms of how the championship is faring, because I know there's been a few rounds of the round robin so far. And who's impressed you so far?
Yeah, the big shock so far was Wexford drawing Kilkenny in the first game in that group. So there's 3 groups, 3 groups of 4 at the minute, and the 3 winners go into semi-final stage. 3 group winners. So yeah, that was a big shock. Wexford, who hadn't been competitive at that level for 2 or 3 years, to come out and draw with Kilkenny. In fact, they'd have been 1B in the league as well. They wouldn't have been even competing against Kilkenny, Galway, Cork, Tipperary were all 1A. So that leaves Kilkenny in a position where they're playing Dublin this weekend, and they have to beat Dublin. Dublin suffered a big defeat last week. So, it's kind of pressure on there. In the other groups then, Clare were very competitive against Galway last week. Clare beat Down in round 1. Galway beat Cork in round 1. So it was Clare versus Galway. And I think there was only 3 or 4 points in it for the finish. So it gives them hope, because Clare now have Cork in a must-win game. Both teams have lost to Galway. Both teams have beaten Down. So that's essentially a knockout match in Ennis. So, you'd be hopeful here that from a Clare point of view that they're really competitive again and in with a shout. And then Waterford have been kind of the revelation so far. They've putting up huge scores against teams. They got to an All Ireland semi-final last year, as you remember, and they gave Cork a right game and were very unlucky to lose that match in the All Ireland semi-final. So for me, they were the dark horses when the draw came, and I just had a quick look. Not that I'm a betting man or anything, but I had a quick look at the odds, and Waterford were 20-1. So I thought that was a great price, because remember, as I said, they win their group, and I think they've more or less their group won already. They're straight into semi-final now. So so
big odds there.
Yeah, big odds. Look, and they've been getting stronger every year. Beth Carton, as we know, a real star, is putting up huge scores. She's already 100 points scored for a league and championship, and we're not even out of the group stage yet. 1 round to go in the group stage, so 100 points accumulated, which is some feat. And really, when it gets from this stage on, you get some really good cracking games. The standard is gone through the roof in Camogie, and you're just hoping as well that there's been very little coverage again, and I suppose with the amount of football games now taking place with the new football format, the round robin Munster Championship, Leinster Championship is competing with all these for airtime and TV time, and it's just a pity that it doesn't even get its own highlights program, even if it's a 30-minute highlights program, because I think that with the standard that's there and some of the scores, that's some of the great scoring and team play that's evident in these games, it would be great if I had an outlet to more viewers. But look, that's for another thing at the minute, as I said. So a really good round 3 to look forward to. If you ask me to predict, I think Kilkenny will bounce back and win that group. Waterford, as I said, have their group 1. And in fact, Limerick and Offaly are playing in what's essentially a relegation match as well. If whoever loses, is into the relegation playoffs with Down. And so that's a big one. Tipperary also had a great league, won the Munster Championship. And they're playing as well. They had a big win over Dublin. So it's Tipperary versus Wexford this week as well. So that's going to be a huge one too. Can Wexford back up their performance from the Kilkenny game? And can Tipperary bring their form from League and also Munster Championship into the All Ireland?
Yeah, so it does sound like, Rory, we've been talking at the start of the show in terms of the prelims, and you know the some of the counties that have struggled for maybe recent seasons seem to be coming to parity with, you know, the powerhouses like the Kilkennys. Like I'm thinking of here, Clare, Waterford here, Wexford. Wexford were powerful. They've had a few years in the doldrums, but it does kind of feel to me, looking from the outside in here, that this competition, this championship is very competitive this year, that there's no foregone conclusion here in terms of who's going to be semi-finalists, quarter-finalists here.
No, this is the most competitive camogie championship in years. Like there was a big tree for the last, I don't know how many years since like Wexford and Tipperary have both kind of faded away in the last decade or so. You had Kilkenny, Cork and Galway, especially in the last few years, winning leagues and championships. And they were the big three going in. But now, like as we said, Tipperary have Munster champions, beaten Cork in that, beaten Waterford in that in the Munster final. You know, they have you know, really stepped it up this year. Wexford, as we saw round one, can they back that up again? And as we see, Clare have closed the gap as well. So look, it's just made this championship, you know, a lot more intriguing. And it's not the kind of format you think where you're going to end up with the big three, like fighting it out for the competition. Like that's not the case this year. So will there be, you know, new champions for the first time in a long time? I think, you know, there very well may be. Be interesting if Clare beat Cork. Like that's a massive shock for Cork not to get out of the group. You know, home advantage and everything. You know, you'd be hoping for a huge performance there from the Clare girls.
And even Kilkenny as well are kind of in must-win territory as well. So there could be major storylines coming out of this Camogie Senior Championship. I think you kind of lose at these round robin. Maybe does the men's team tournament have to go the same way? Straight knockout in terms of Munster Senior Hurling Championship, Leinster Senior Hurling Championship, and then play a round robin, very similar to the football that you have in All Ireland series based off round robin. So I don't know if hurling counterparts can maybe take a lesson or two off our Camogie, you know, association here in terms of that. So, but yeah, look, it's all to look forward to here, and I suppose we'll continue to cover this here.
I forgot to mention as well, Mark, Antrim, who hadn't been in the senior championship for a few years. Antrim beat Limerick in round one, so Antrim are right in there as well, and to try and qualify, which would be, you know, great news for Antrim.
That'd be huge, considering that they're just
they've won two. They backed it up. They beat Offaly at the weekend as well, so they're 2 instead of 2. So they're playing Waterford now for top spot. So, you know, that's another story taking place in the championship.
That's huge, considering that they just got promoted this season. So, I mean, they're well and truly consolidating their status. But as you say, it could be a magnificent achievement for Antrim if they can get there. But it just shows the momentum, doesn't it, in terms of junior intermediate, you know, that you can get a team here to really go through the grades here and, you know, really kind of prosper. So, look, I think there's an awful lot of good storylines here, Rory. We'll certainly focus on this Camogie Senior Hurling Championship going forward here, because I know we were kind of really focused in on the juvenile underage men's championships. That's all gone now, so let's kind of focus in on this anyway till the end of the season. I suppose, Rory, it's been a lengthy one, but many thanks tonight for the contributions. Great points as always. I suppose next week we'll focus in on the All Ireland quarter finals here, Rory. We'll see if you're happy or sad after Clare and Dublin. I suppose the first game on TUS Gaelic grounds on Saturday. I suppose we'll also have a look at that Tipperary Galway game. I know a few of my relations to Tipperary will be not talking to me for the rest of the week, tipping Galway here. But sure.
Maybe they'll be delighted you've tipped Galway if they're coming at it from the
well, that's it exactly. So I'm based here in Galway. So that's yeah. So look, I think that'll be a cracker. So look, we'll review them obviously. We'll also look at any intercounty injury news that's coming out of the camps here leading into the All Ireland semi-finals. And also look, as Rory's alluded to, an awful lot of exciting storylines coming from the Senior Camogie Championship. So we'll have a look at that as well. I suppose, Rory, enjoyed TUS Gaelic grounds at the weekend and have a good weekend.
Cheers. You too, Mark. Take care.
All right, no worries. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.